Hello, good evening. Welcome to my IVF Answers and the European Fertility Society. We are back with one more webinar for you. And today, definitely important topic, and we are happy to bring this topic to you. This is something that we don't do quite often, and I think that we don't do it quite enough. But I'm glad that we are finally talking about this topic, and we have a very special guest with us, Ian Stones, who's right here with us. You can see him right here. Hello, Ian. Welcome to my IVF Answers, and welcome to the European Fertility Society. I'm really excited to have you here for sure. How are you feeling? Hope you are ready to educate us a little bit and definitely inspire us as well.
Thank you, Karen. Well, thank you so much for inviting me to chat this evening. Kind of any opportunity for me to talk about male fertility and sperm, I'm well up for it. And it is, like you say, kind of a subject that isn't perhaps covered enough, and that's why we're doing what we're doing. So I really am hugely appreciative that you've invited us on tonight. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us. Or as always, we will discuss male fertility, and of course, Ian will start with his presentation on the topic. But afterwards, he will have time for your questions. So, as always, please just put those in the chat. Ian will definitely take care of those right after his presentation. Let me just add that Ian is the founder and co-director of Testim, and he will definitely explain a little bit more on that. And so I'm glad that we are here. And remember that if there's anything you wish to ask, there will be time for it. So don't hesitate. This is a session to educate, to ask questions, and we are happy that we are able to be here and support you as much as possible. And I guess we can go ahead with our presentation. I think it's you are ready. I hope Ian as well. Before we start, some few words you would like to say. If so, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction, Caroline. My name's Ian Stones. I am co-director of Testim, and our mission is to change the world of male fertility and to raise awareness and get men educated and properly tested. My background is nearly 16 years, actually, as an acupuncturist, and I spent a lot of that time supporting couples going through fertility treatment. And it was through that I realised that the men weren't getting any help or support. And it's like, okay, I need to do something about that. I worked very closely with Fertility Network UK, the leading fertility charity in the United Kingdom, and set up their first ever male fertility support program, male fertility support webinar. Support group, that's what I meant. Set up their support group and ran that for 3 years, which later became the infertility support group that we ran with Rod Gilbert. So I've seen kind of firsthand in terms of my clinic experience and then with the support group, the impact this has on men. And it's through all of this work that I've really wanted to kind of address the issue. I'm working now very closely with my partners in crime, kind of Michael Close and Toby Trice, to really make a difference. So that's a little bit about my background. But let's kind of jump in and get started. So I've got some slides so that you've got something else to look at. We're going to talk about the male fertility experience. What's it actually like for a man to go through fertility, and to kind of understand that, I think we kind of got to get a little bit of the backstory of how the process and the system kind of fails the man, and therefore what impact does that have on the man. But I wanted to start with just a few stats, and the first one, is fertility a female issue? Because certainly here in the United Kingdom, and I can be pretty sure globally, this is the same kind of concept or same kind of thought process. It's almost immediately assumed that fertility is a female issue. It's kind of what we're led to believe, perhaps through our fertility, well, not fertility education, we don't get any of that at school, but through kind of education, through the media, everything is so heavily focused on the woman. And actually, it's not really representative of true life, because we now know that actually it's pretty much an equal split. So a fertility, a couple that are struggling to conceive, in 30% of the cases, it's a male factor. In 30% of the cases, it's a female factor. In the remaining 40%, it's a bit of both. So it's just as likely that it's a male factor than it is a female factor. Yet we don't see anywhere near the same level of media coverage, conversation, Instagram accounts, Instagram information, um, educational content. We see so much less for the man. It's all very much focused on the woman, which is unfortunately just compounding the issue even further. And we need to change this, and we need to make couples that are struggling to conceive realize that it's just as likely that it's a man. But we also need to make men specifically realize that it's just as likely to be them than it is the woman. And that way, I think hopefully we can help men step up, take responsibility for their fertility and their health, and realize that they've got an absolutely equal part to play in the fertility game. But just some fertility facts. So 1 in 14 men in the world are affected by fertility. So that's 7% of the global population, or male population. I think I've seen mixtures of figures here, ranging from 30 to 60 million men are affected by fertility. That's a lot of men. In fact, we now know that male infertility is just as common as diabetes. Now, diabetes is a huge kind of health concern. Certainly in the UK, it's one of the top ones. It gets a lot of attention. There's screening programs. There's kind of awareness. There's education. Male fertility is just the same kind in terms of its prevalence, yet it doesn't get anything. Nowhere near as much kind of coverage. 1 in 100 men will be what's called asospermic. So 1 in 100 men will have no sperm in their ejaculate. Now, there can be varying reasons for that, and sometimes it's entirely treatable, sometimes it's not. But that's quite a shocking statistic. I've done webinars recently for some quite big organizations that have got like thousands of employees. And when you work out that, okay, maybe in that kind of cohort of staff, you've maybe got 50, 100 men that are not producing any sperm at all or not able to get any sperm out from in their ejaculate. That's quite a lot of men. And men won't know this. They won't know that they could be, one of those 1 in 100. So, we really need to let men know that they could have an issue. And the 30-50% here is the 30%, that we mentioned before, 30% of fertility issues sit with the man. But we also now know that the biggest reason, over 50% of IVF cases that go, IVF treatments that go through clinics, and over 50% of that is actually down to male factor infertility. So it's a huge part of the equation, but it's not getting covered. So we need to change that. So I just want to talk about the typical fertility journey. And I've seen this countless times when I was in clinic, and I've heard it countless times through all the men that we've supported through Testim, all the men that we've supported through the support group. This is typically how things run, certainly in the UK. I can't speak for other countries in Europe. But typically, couples, boy meets girl, girl meets boy, they kind of settle down, they maybe get a house or they move in together, and then they start thinking, oh, should we start a family? So they start trying. And we know that within 2 years, 85% of couples trying to conceive will conceive naturally. But that obviously leaves 15% that don't. So after kind of 2 years, they kind of perhaps start asking some questions of themselves. But just kind of thinking back to school and education, kind of, everyone's kind of told, well, you've only got to have unprotected sex once, and you're going to get a woman pregnant. That's the message that boys get told when they're young. So actually, when after 2 years it's not going to plan, it does leave them kind of scratching their head a little bit. But you can guarantee after 2 years that most people are starting to think, well, we better get some investigations done. And it's at this point, so this early on, this is where the system begins to fail, both the man and the woman, really. So in the UK, the couple will go off to their GP. They go off and have some standard assessments, and the GP will look at the woman, and the GP will also look at the man. But at this point, there's a huge disparity in terms of already there's a huge disparity in terms of the tests that get offered to the man and the woman. And this is, what I must say is this is absolutely no reflection on GPs whatsoever. They do an amazing job, but they are working in a system that is broken, and it's a system that doesn't support men particularly well. So they have their assessments, and I'm going to go talk about the tests in a little bit more detail in a minute. But basically, it's a basic kind of screening from the GP. The GP may offer some diet and lifestyle advice, kind of very broad things, but the guy will get his semen analysis. And if that semen analysis is suboptimal, um, what will happen is that couple will be offered a fertility referrals. They will be referred up to a fertility specialist or a fertility consultant. Now, that referral pathway in the United Kingdom is actually usually to an IVF unit, well, still within the NHS, but they will go and see a fertility consultant, and that consultant will be a gynecologist. Now, a gynecologist is a specialist in female reproductive health. They're not necessarily specialists in male reproductive health. So, where a couple have perhaps got male fertility factor issues going on, they've suddenly ended up in front of a female reproductive specialist. So you can see almost straight away the paths kind of diverged and gone the kind of wrong way for the man. We've had the woman who's had some assessments, we've had the guy who's had a basic semen analysis, and now they're in an IVF unit potentially in front of a gynecologist. And of course, once they're in an IVF unit, inevitably they're going to end up potentially having IVF because that's kind of the treatment pathway. This is what the NICE guidelines say. Our National Institute for Clinical and Healthcare Excellence in the UK says, okay, if a couple aren't conceiving, after 2 years, we run some basic tests, we get them to a gynecologist, and they go for IVF. And, quite often, the couple are a little bit naive as to what's going on. They're a little bit naive as to what their options are, and they put a lot of trust in the people that they speak to, and so they should. They're consultants, they're qualified medical professionals, and so that pathway leads them into IVF. So they think, oh, okay, great, we'll go into IVF. I think people are getting wise to this now that IVF is not necessarily a solution, but there are some people that will see IVF as a solution. But oh, great, we're going for IVF. That's going to fix the problem, and unfortunately, it doesn't. IVF is a great intervention, and it certainly has its place, but it's not always the right sort of tool. It's not the only tool in the box as well. And what we have is if we've got a man with suboptimal sperm that's been assessed at GP level but hasn't been rectified, no other investigations have been done, an IVF clinic will say, well, that's fine, don't worry, we can do ICSI. And ICSI is offered up as a solution for male fertility problems. It's not actually, nobody is actually thinking, hang on a minute, why is that sperm not as healthy as it could be? Do we need to go back and find out why that is? So ICSI is held up as the solution, which actually it's a workaround. It's a way of manipulating the sperm rather than fixing the sperm. So this couple go through their IVF cycle, and if they're incredibly lucky, the first one works, and hey presto, they've got a baby. But actually, we know what IVF is. What 1 in 3, 30% chance of it working. Obviously, there's huge variations, depends on age and medical history and other backgrounds. But there is the chance of potential repeated failures. And if we've got a sperm factor within a couple's fertility issue that hasn't been picked up, hasn't been assessed, then you're going to potentially see continued repeated failures. And I've spoken to many men, and Toby, one of our co-directors, is an absolute case in point here, where 2 rounds of IVF, embryos weren't developing, they were collapsing, things weren't going to plan. The advice they were given was, well, we'll just do another cycle. And so many couples get caught in this process of, we've done IVF, it didn't work, the sperm's suboptimal, we're going to do ICSI, let's just tweak the stimulation drugs for the woman, let's change this, let's look at the woman a bit more, can we do intralipids, should we do embryo glue, maybe an endometrial scratch? And the guy is not looked at again. Maybe never, but hopefully, well, maybe never, or maybe they will get looked at somewhere down the line. But it's often not until a couple have been through several IVF cycles or several failures that somebody says, hang on a minute, should we look at the sperm in a bit more detail? So this is honestly the story that I've seen time and time again. So let's just talk about the testing that couples are offered, and this is typically at kind of GP level. When the woman goes in, for an assessment at GP level. She'll be offered she is definitely offered a hormone test, normally an FSH and an LH test to confirm that she's ovulating. Possibly an AMH test as well, actually, to get a kind of picture of her egg reserve. She'll get a chlamydia screening, possibly a laparoscopy, although that'd be quite a major intervention at first kind of level. Ultrasound scan, make sure the tubal patency, make sure her fallopian tubes are clear, her BMI, physical examination. So it's a good initial assessment for a woman. However, on the man side, he will get a semen analysis, he may get a chlamydia screening, and he may get a physical examination. But that is it. He will not get a hormone test. He won't get a match. I'm going to tell you all the other tests that he could have had. So it's a very basic assessment of a man. So he goes in, sees his GP, he does a semen analysis, which isn't always easy for a man. He's got to go to some corridor or some toilet in some back corridor, produce a sample whilst people are chatting outside the door. He's got to hand over a pot of his semen to the receptionist in front of other people, or he's got to produce it at home and get to the clinic within an hour, which creates huge amounts of stress. But he hands that over, he gets his results back from the GP, and the GP says, yeah, they're okay, that they're not great, so we're going to refer you on to IVF. Nothing else is offered, no other support, no other guidance. And I have spoken to, unfortunately, too many men who have spoken to maybe not even their GP. They've been delivered their results by phone by somebody non-medically trained who said, oh, actually, yeah, you've got no sperm. Or your sperm's not great, or you've only got 1,500 sperm, or something like that. Absolutely devastating news for the man, and then no support and no direction as to where he goes next. And what's absolutely kind of heartbreaking for us, and this is why we're on our mission with Testim, is here's what a man could have had, and really that probably should read should have had. So he should have what we believe he should have a physical examination, an ultrasound scan on his testicles to check for any lumps, bumps, hydrocele, varicocele. He should have a full comprehensive infection screen. He could have an oxidative stress test, a DNA fragmentation test, and anti-sperm antibodies. So actually, there's a whole load of other tests. In fact, there's one missing off there. I haven't done a hormone profile. It would be another important test that he could have as well. So there's a whole load of other tests that could be offered to a man, potentially at GP level, if not at the fertility referral level before IVF, that could actually identify a whole load of other factors that could be going on. And we know the research is out there, the evidence is there, that high oxidative stress, high DNA fragmentation, which can be caused by infections, it can be caused by varicocele, it can be caused by lifestyle and diet, is very, very closely linked to things like recurrent miscarriage, IVF failures, and couples struggling to conceive. And there's a strong correlation between oxidative stress and DNA fragmentation and live birth rates. Yet these tests don't get offered as standard, and they only sometimes get offered further down the line. They're not routine, and they're not strongly encouraged. And unfortunately, when couples kind of find this information, it's often many years too late. The couple may be, she may be 39, 40. So to actually then go back and look at what's going on for the man means maybe another year's worth of investigations and treatment. And actually now they don't have the time. So what we want to see is actually a lot of these tests being done a lot earlier for a man. So I think, tonight's webinar is actually also about this, the male fertility perspective or the kind of male fertility experience. And, I'm certainly not belittling the woman's experience of fertility whatsoever. This is a couples thing. Obviously I'm talking heterosexual couples here. This is a couples thing. Both partners or both the man and the woman have their experience of fertility treatment. And I think there's a lot more support for women. There's a lot more awareness of what women go through during IVF and during fertility struggles. And certainly women experience a whole lot more kind of physically and emotionally, I think, with the injections, the hormone therapy, egg collection, transfer, the 2-week wait, potential miscarriages. There's definitely a lot more in that sense for the women. But actually, let's not forget that the man is also very much impacted by this as well. So actually, what happens for the man, if we think all the way back to that GP assessment, he has his semen analysis. The next step, if they don't conceive, is a referral and they end up at an IVF clinic or in front of a gynecologist. At that point, and this is what I've heard from men time and time again, at that point, the man suddenly becomes a bit of a spare part. He starts to become quite isolated from the process because the the clinicians may look at the sperm semen analysis, say, okay, it's not great, but don't worry, we're going to do ICSI. And that kind of almost like the man's like, oh, okay, well, what can I do? There's nothing I can do. They've told me there's an intervention. It sounds like a solution. Um, Fine, I'll just go with that. So they begin to feel isolated from the process. And I've spoken to men who have been sat in a consultation, and his results have been discussed between the consultant and his partner as if he wasn't there. And that's not on. So the man suddenly then becomes to feel a bit like a sperm donor. He's just there. He's just got to perform in a toilet, get his semen in a pot, hand it over, and the clinic will do the rest. And actually, this goes all the way back to the kind of 2 years of trying as well. We mustn't forget by the time a couple get to IVF, there's potentially 2, 3, 4, 5 years worth of trying. There's been the temperature charting. There's been the ovulation window. There's been the kind of regimented planned sex that they've got to have sex at a certain time of the day or a certain time of the month. you know the guy is suddenly, during that process, feeling a huge amount of pressure to perform, you know as and when he's told to, which is a massive turn off for a guy. So there may be erectile dysfunction issues, there may be self-esteem issues, all sorts. So it is a huge pressure for men to perform, both in terms of, okay, I've got to, produce a sample and get it in the pot, at a certain time, but there's also this pressure to kind of be performing for his partner. And actually, that pressure extends to things like diet and lifestyle. And she's done all the research, looked at the forums, and sort of said, "Oh, look, you need to take these supplements, and you need to get off your bike, and you've got to stop drinking beer." And the guy's like, "Christ, where's all this coming from?" Um, so for a lot of men, they can begin to feel like a failure, and this is certainly true when they get their semen analysis results and they're not good. We unfortunately have this weird um, kind of belief or system. Well, yeah, it's a belief system, I suppose, that a man's masculinity is somehow directly correlated to his semen analysis results or his fertility. Couldn't be further from the truth. Um, your semen analysis, your sperm production is just a biological function. It's got no bearing on who you are as a person, who you are as a man. However, when a guy hears that he's got no sperm, or that his sperm is pretty much useless, it hits him really, really hard. And he takes that and he takes it and he internalizes it because he's got nowhere to go with that. So he feels like a failure. He feels less of a man. And then ultimately, he feels like he can't provide what his partner truly wants, and that is a baby. And he feels like an absolute, you know, failure and a letdown to his partner. And unfortunately, I've spoken to too many men where they have had to say to their partner, or they haven't had to say, but they feel that they have needed to say, I can't give you the baby that you want. I give you permission to divorce me so that you can go and get your baby somewhere else. That's not okay. It's not okay that men are saying that. It's not okay that men feel that way and that is their only solution. Um, so the impact is huge. Now, there's the financial worries. That's another big thing that men take on. So it's quite interesting when you've worked with a lot of couples and you've seen what they've been through, and I've supported a lot of women going through IVF and fertility treatment, and they're looking at forums, they're thinking about their diet, they're getting rid of plastic from the house, they've got their eco water bottle, they're drinking gallons of it, they're doing all of this. In the meantime, the guy's very much worrying about the money. It's like, okay, how are we going to fund £10,000 IVF cycle? But actually, the other thing he's really worrying about is his partner, is his wife. He's thinking, Christ, she's got to go through these injections. How is she going to cope with this? She's really upset. How do I console her? What do I say? What do I do? So not only is he worrying about her, he's also worrying about himself. And what he doesn't then do is talk about his own feelings, because he doesn't want to put those upon his partner. He doesn't want to make her feel worse. So you end up in this strange situation where actually you have a couple going through a really difficult emotional kind of process, but they're not talking equally about how they're feeling. And the women pick up on this and they're like, he won't talk, he won't tell me what's going on. So this guy is really carrying this huge burden. And emotionally, this impacts their daily functioning. This there's research to support this. There's studies, I think, by Fertility Network UK that actually highlight that men really struggle with their day-to-day functioning. So they will struggle to go to work, they will struggle to focus at work, they'll struggle to see their friends, they'll struggle to socialize, and they become perhaps a bit more kind of reclusive. They're actually more likely to experience depression. Again, this has come up time and time again in the support group that I ran, and it's not uncommon for the word suicide to appear in these conversations, that men will consider suicide as a direct result of their fertility and the depression that follows from it. And as I said, they feel less of a man, they feel like an absolute failure. So, and finally, they have no one to speak to. There's very, very little support for men out there. It is changing, and I've seen a huge change in the kind of 3 years, 4 years that I've been working with the charity and that I ran the support group. We're definitely seeing more men speak up, but it's very hard for a man to find a support group. It's very hard for a man to actually feel confident to go into a support group and say, "Hi, I'm Ian. I've got sperm issues," or "I've got no sperm," and it's very hard for them to talk in their friendship group. And I was just editing one of our podcasts today, and we're talking about the banter that goes on between men. Yes, men love a good bit of ribbing and a bit of joke, bit of Mickey taking, but it's got to have its place and it's got to have its time. And so many men have opened up to their friends, or well, maybe haven't, so not so many, but when they have opened up, the guys turn around, they, especially if they do it in a small group of mates, somebody somewhere will probably turn around, "Oh, don't worry, mate, you can borrow some of my sperm," or, "I'll send your missus round to my house, I'll get her pregnant for you." Um, yes, banter's got its place, that's not its place. And actually those sorts of comments are really hurtful to men, because there's years of heartache and worry and stress that's come before that point. So we need to enable men to speak up. We need to help them find the right support and be able to talk properly and openly about this stuff. So, as you can see, it has a big impact on men. There's a lot for us to consider, and we need to make sure that men are properly supported. So, I just want to now share some of the common issues and kind of look at some of the kind of other factors, or the factors that men need to consider in terms of the issues that they could have and the do's and don'ts in terms of their fertility. So the common issues that a lot of that are common in a lot of fertility stories, and a lot of issues that are common in couples that are struggling to conceive, are these kind of 5 things here. Varicocele is actually probably one of the biggest issues within male fertility. So 15%, I think it's around 15% of the male population will have a varicocele. So a varicocele is an enlarged blood vessel within the scrotum. It's to do with poor venous return. So you end up with this pooling of blood. It expands the blood vessel a little bit, and that blood creates excessive heat within the testicles. And the testicles are outside the body for a reason, and that reason is to keep the testicles cool. They need to be 2 degrees cooler than core body temperature. So actually, when you then have this pooling blood, it creates extra heat stress, and that denatures the sperm. It causes DNA fragmentation, and it kind of makes them pretty lazy, to be honest. That's when you're going to get sluggish, slow sperm. So like I say, varicocele is present in 15% of men, regardless of whether they're trying to conceive or not. When you then look at the male population that are struggling to conceive, that jumps up to 40%. When you then look at men that have one child but are struggling to conceive their second, so secondary infertility, that jumps to something like 80%. So varicocele is hugely common. And if we think back to the assessments that are offered at GP level, and could be offered at IVF clinics but aren't routinely offered, a simple physical examination may pick up a varicocele. If not, an ultrasound definitely will. So it's a very, very simple thing to diagnose, yet it doesn't get done routinely. Then looking at slightly more advanced diagnostics, things like oxidative stress and DNA fragmentation. So oxidative stress often comes around from things like lifestyle and diet. So, is the guy eating the wrong types of foods? Is he sedentary? Does he work in a hot environment? Oxidative stress is very common, and this is then about taking the right antioxidants at the right time, having had the right test to make sure it's the right treatment. And DNA fragmentation is another hugely common issue. There is some guidance now in the World Health Organization literature on assessing sperm that says that DNA fragmentation tests should be considered if a couple aren't having any success with IVF, but still it's not a routine test. DNA fragmentation is looking at what's going on at the DNA in the head of the sperm. And what can happen is that that DNA can get very easily damaged, either in the process of where it gets packed or when it comes to being unpacked. The damage occurs between the strands in the molecules. And this again is down to things like infection, oxidative stress, lifestyle, diet, and DNA fragmentation is very closely linked with recurrent miscarriage and repeated IVF failures. Infections are quite common as well, and these can be asymptomatic. So a man can be carrying an infection, not know that he's got an infection. He's passing it between himself and his partner, so she now has an infection. And these infections, again, can cause oxidative stress, they can cause DNA fragmentation. And as we mentioned, azoospermia, again, is another common issue. 1 in 100 men. This is where no sperm is getting out. Now, it could be that the testicles are producing sperm, but there's a blockage or some of the pipework is missing, in which case that guy could biologically have his own child. Or there could be azoospermia where the testicles just aren't working and that guy is not producing any sperm. But the number of guys that I've spoken to that have azoospermia and they're told that they should consider getting a sperm donor because they're not going to be able to have their own child, when actually, if they had the right investigations and the right treatment, they could still have sperm. And I've spoken to one guy where he had a surgical sperm retrieval, and they only retrieved 9 sperm, not 9,909 million, just literally 9. Or you can count it on 2 hands. And he went on to have his own biological child through ICSI. But had he stayed in the system and not learnt this stuff from us, he would have ended up going for a sperm donor. So these are some of the common issues that are present in men that aren't necessarily getting picked up because the right tests aren't being offered. So I think what's really important is that we look at positive steps that men can take. How do they actually kind of take control of their health, take control of their fertility? Because what we've seen or what I've presented so far shows that actually the system does fail men. They're not offered routine screening. They're not offered comprehensive advanced testing. They go into a system that kind of fails them and just kind of reiterates the kind of belief that fertility is a female issue. So I think for men, they need to get themselves educated. They need to actually know what they can do around their fertility, and they need to look at getting the right tests, getting the right information. And that's down to them. That's down to them to kind of go and find that information. But for us as kind of healthcare professionals, we need to make sure that information is getting to them, and we need to make sure it's out there and easily accessible, and that it's relevant and it's kind of consistent and reliable. I think is really important. There's so many potential myths around male fertility that guys just don't. They're like, really, is that a thing? Do I really have to change my underwear to loose fitting underwear? Do I really need to take supplements? Do I really have to get off my bike? They don't believe it. They don't believe it because they've not seen enough evidence or they've not had enough reliable, trustworthy information sent to them. So let's get that education, get that information out there. The other important thing is that they actually get tested and that they don't just settle for a semen analysis. My dream would be that actually every man gets that full list of tests. So an oxidative stress test, DNA fragmentation, a hormone profile, a physical examination, an ultrasound. If every guy got that and an infection screening, then we would probably pick up so many more male factor fertility issues that could be treated. Then that would be really important. And I think that's the other point here about getting all these tests done, and also the other huge point about male fertility is a huge amount of it is actually entirely treatable. Yet most men don't know this. So if you've got high DNA fragmentation and a varicocele, that varicocele can be repaired. And much as the evidence is a little bit mixed at the moment, um, there is enough evidence to show that a varicocele repair can potentially improve DNA fragmentation. So, I think many men end up going into IVF thinking that ICSI is the answer for their sperm, thinking that there's nothing else that they can do. Whereas actually, if they get the right tests, get the right support, there's a whole load of things that they can do, and there are treatment options that can make a huge difference to their fertility and their potential kind of treatment outcomes. And a huge part of that is for men to get on top of their health and to actually pay attention to this stuff and say, it does matter what I eat, it does matter what I drink, it does matter what I do exercise wise. And actually, you can see some incredible turnarounds with the simplest of things. So, actually, I've worked with a guy who had 8 million sperm on his semen analysis, should be 15 million or more. And through some very, very simple lifestyle and diet changes, he went from 8 million to 24 million. And for people in the UK that may have seen a recent documentary called Save Our Sperm, which had 3 celebrities looking at how they can how they can improve their sperm, every single one of them saw some improvement in their semen analysis as a direct result of lifestyle and diet changes. So men need to get on top of their health. They need to take action. And the important thing also, if they're struggling, is to get support and get the right support. So here in the UK, I thought I had a different slide here. In terms of the support, I'll come on to that in a minute. But I just thought I'd give you some headline kind of do nots for men. And these are the ones that actually, they all count, but these are some of the kind of headline ones that men kind of hear and like, oh, is it really a thing? And I'll kind of whiz through these relatively quickly. Heat is hugely important, as I mentioned, in terms of varicocele. So making sure that, yes, you're wearing loose fitting underwear. You're not, if you're working in a hot environment, that you try and kind of limit the heat exposure where you can. Long periods sitting will raise scrotal temperatures. If you're a pilot, a taxi driver, a train driver, somewhere where you're sat for long periods of time, it's not great. So do what you can to keep your testicles cool. Diet is really important. So this kind of collection of brown food where there's no fresh fruit or vegetables, this stuff's really bad. It's not good at all. Smoking, absolute killer of sperm. There's just nothing good about smoking and sperm health. Alcohol in moderation is actually okay. So keeping well below your kind of 14 units per week and having, say, a beer on a Friday night and a Saturday night, and maybe a glass of wine with dinner on Thursday night. That's absolutely fine. What's not fine is 10 pints on Friday night, another 6 pints on Saturday night, and then kind of saying, yeah, I'm done. And it's okay, I've been good all week. So moderate, drinking or moderated drinking is okay. Cycling is definitely not good for the sperm. I have written an article on this, and I think once you start hitting something like 5 hours a week, you're potentially causing micro trauma to your testicles, which is going to cause all sorts of issues, as well as the heat issue as well. Weights, and so the reason I put weights with pills next to them is actually considering things like protein powders, but very specifically anabolic steroids. I've literally just finished an article on this, and anabolic steroids are absolutely terrible for sperm health because they, in effect, eventually turn the testicles off. So have an awareness of, is your guy or as a guy, are you going to the gym? Are you taking protein powders, which can, in some cases, have anabolic steroids in them in a small dose? Do you really need those? Are they full of sweeteners and bulking agents and things like that? So exercise is really important, but do you really need to supplement kind of protein powders and things like that? Plastics, again, is a huge thing. So the endocrine disrupting element of plastic, so chemicals within plastic that get into our bodies and mimic hormones, and they specifically kind of mimic estrogen. So again, kind of suppresses, it doesn't truly suppress testosterone, but it changes how our body responds to these kind of chemicals. Caffeine, again, is very similar to alcohol. Moderate intakes of caffeine, absolutely fine. But if you're taking 8 double espressos a day, might be time to knock it down a little bit. Mobile phones, radiation, again, no laptops on the lap, no phones in your pocket. All of these things, usually things that men hear, often from their partner, and they think, yeah, really, is it a thing? It is a thing. And this is just another example of why we need to get this information out to couples. And over-the-counter medication, or sometimes prescribed medication. So there are certain medications that men need to be aware of. So if you are on prescribed medications, have a chat with your GP and make sure that they're not potentially impacting your fertility. So then what are the positive steps that men can take? Well, it's almost the complete opposite of the other slide. I will whiz through this one. So a good healthy diet, lots of rainbow kind of coloured foods, oily fishes, dark leafy greens, fruit, vegetables, all of these things are full of all the nutrients, minerals and antioxidants that we need. Keep hydrated, water's really important. You know, I think these two kind of go together. Kind of mix your exercise up. Don't be down the gym absolutely pounding it out and pumping iron all the time. Do some yoga, do some relaxation, do some breathing. That's all really important stuff. So actually kind of blend your exercise so it's a bit of all sorts. This one isn't actually about weeing more often. This one's about regular ejaculation. Men sometimes have this belief that actually if they store their sperm up, it's going to be healthier. Or it's not going to be healthier, they're going to have more of it and more is better. This is not true. We know that regular ejaculation is really important in terms of keeping your sperm healthy. The longer they're stored up, the more prone they are to oxidative stress, possibly heat damage, DNA fragmentation. So actually keep your sperm going through every 3 to 5 days if you're trying to conceive. Next one is, this is the loose fitting underwear. It is a thing. Tight fitting underwear keeps the testicles close to the body. It raises scrotal temperature. So we want loose fitting underwear to allow kind of things to kind of air to flow and things to be free. And actually, this one's really important. Is getting in front of the right clinician. So I kind of haven't really mentioned this in great detail as of yet. I've talked about the tests that don't happen and actually the tests that men should get. And I've talked about how they end up in front of potentially the wrong clinician. If you're struggling to conceive and you're struggling to find the right tests and the right support and you're not getting the right answers, you need to get yourself in front of a urologist and or andrologist. Those terms are kind of interchangeable. A urologist specializes in the kind of genitals, prostate, bladder, kidneys, and that can be both male or female. An andrologist is a specialist in the male in the realm of male fertility. So an andrologist is the kind of equivalent of a gynecologist. So as a man, you need to get yourself in front of an andrologist if you're struggling to conceive, and they will then be able to run the appropriate tests, take the appropriate history, give you a physical examination, and actually look after you and give you that kind of comprehensive assessment. So it's very much about getting in front of the right medical professional to get the right tests. And then do reach out for support. As a man, or men aren't typically very good at this, but actually reaching out for support is really important. So whether that's counseling, whether it's actually finding a friend that you can speak to, whether it's actually just talking to your partner. It could just be you need to have more conversations between the two of you. Speaking to family members, whoever it is, find support. And this was the slide that I thought I was going to share earlier. In the UK, obviously, we have Fertility Network UK. They have a free support line that people can call. They have numerous online support groups. And the main one for the men is the infertility support group, which I ran with Toby twice for 3 years. Online Zoom meeting, you can join anonymously. You don't have to have your camera on, you don't have to contribute, you can sit and listen. And we used to get anywhere between 15 and 50 men join us on that group. And it was a hugely valued, and still is, hugely valuable group where men can be with other men that are going through exactly the same thing. So there is support out there. Do have a look. And finally, I just want to tell you a little bit about Testim. So in terms of support, what we're doing to help men in this area. Our mission is very much about raising awareness, which is why I'm so pleased to be chatting to you all tonight. Get men aware that they can have an issue, get them educated, get them the right tests or get them access to the right tests. And we're actually very close to launching our own DNA fragmentation service that's going to be coupled with an oxidative stress test service as well. But also then making sure men have got the right support. So we want to make sure that they've got that emotional support. They can reach out to us if they want. They can reach out to the charity, but also the right clinical support. So making sure they're in front of the right clinician as well. How do we do what we do? Well, we've got a free questionnaire that guys can access online. So from our website, you can go and do our free questionnaire. And this is basically a very simple kind of stuff. It looks simple, but there's a lot of work that's gone in behind it. It's a very simple, like in effect, a risk assessment tool. It's going to ask you about your male fertility health. It's going to ask you about your general health, your exercise, and your work. And what that does is it then gives you a score and it highlights where you can improve things and what areas you need to focus on. But importantly, it gives you instant health recommendations. So it will tell you if you need to change to loose fitting underwear. It will tell you if actually you're slightly overweight and you need to reduce your BMI. It will tell you if you need to drink less alcohol. So all of that's calibrated into the questionnaire so that you get instant health recommendations. You can download those. You can email them to yourself. You can email them then onto a clinician or a practitioner so they can see your information. The questionnaire will also um, recommend further tests for you to consider. So actually, if you haven't looked at advanced tests for yourself as a man, our questionnaire will say to you, actually, you need to consider an oxidative stress test, or you need to consider a DNA fragmentation test. But it will tell you why as well. It will quantify why you need to have that test. So it might be that you've said on the questionnaire that you have a sedentary job and you spend most of your day sitting. In that case, it will probably recommend that you have a DNA fragmentation test because we know if you're sitting, you've got raised scrotal temperature and that's going to lead to DNA fragmentation. So it'll always explain why. But most importantly, within this questionnaire, it will highlight the need for a referral to a medical practitioner, medical professional. So if you've said to us that you had undescended testicles as a child or you had mumps, we know that that is a red flag for male factor infertility, and we will then suggest that you go and see a urologist or andrologist. So that's probably one of the most important parts of the questionnaire, is making sure that actually this question that isn't getting asked by your GP or it's not being asked at your IVF clinic has highlighted that there's an issue that you may want to get seen to. So come and join us. Come and give us a follow. We're on Instagram at testhim Ltd. We are on YouTube, Spotify, Facebook. We've got our own podcast that goes out monthly. We've had Jonathan Ramsey with us. We've had Melanie Brown. We talk DNA fragmentation. We talk about Toby's Racing for Fertility campaign. There's loads of really, really useful information on there for you to listen to and follow. So yeah, do come and join us. And finally, something I haven't really mentioned throughout this, Toby, who's one of our co-directors, is a train driver by day, and then every now and again he jumps into a Porsche racing car. Toby is a patient. He's been through the fertility journey. He went through 6 years of IVF treatment, 2 failed IVF treatments, and it was only as a result of the support group, it was only as a result of learning about his fertility that we then got him tested. We then found out he had DNA fragmentation. We found out he had a varicocele. He had it repaired, and within 3 months of having it repaired, he conceived naturally. So it just shows Toby's kind of a shining example of how the appropriate testing for a man can make all the difference. So what Toby does now, he turned to motorsport at his darkest point when he was suffering with depression. And actually, that was his saviour. Motorsport was his saviour. And it turns out he was quite good at it. And he has kind of progressed through the ranks. He was Ginetta GT Academy champion. He's now racing in the Porsche Sprint Challenge. And what we do, or what Toby does, we do with him as well through Testim, is we race for fertility. And we use motorsport as a way of breaking down the stigma of male fertility and to help men get talking. So there we go. Thank you very much. It's probably quite a lot to cover, but I hope you enjoyed it, and very happy to take any questions.
So much indeed, Ian. That was really interesting. That was really something that I think sounds, easy, what to do, etc. But it's so important that we are talking about this. It's so important that you were able to explain what should be done. As you said, it's still something that is not often reminded of. So I'm glad that we are here. And today, as you know, we have now the Q&A part. So if there are any questions, go ahead, type those in. Ian is right here for you. And I see one question from Emma. So let's have a look at this first question from Emma. So, how important is the male nutrition? What kind of food helps sperm quality? What do you think of supplements? Would you recommend vitamins for the men or something else? You've mentioned this during your presentation, but I think it's something that definitely, it's the question that always is repeated for sure.
Definitely. Yeah, it is a question that comes up an awful lot, comes g often comes from the women. So basically how what do I need to feed my man to get into, to
It's
improve my
true.
sperm? Hopefully men should be kind of asking this question. So, okay, is this a thing? Do I need to kind of focus on
Mhm.
it? Absolutely. It's a vital part of the whole fertility thing. And importantly, really, I think it's the easiest, quickest and earliest thing you can do to improve your sperm quality, because it's something you can do at home. It's something you can sit down and do together and you can plan. Without being too crass, unfortunately, might be a little bit, but for a guy, what he puts in his mouth determines what comes out of his penis in terms of his sperm quality. So if he puts rubbish food in, it's going to have an impact on his sperm quality. So you need to put good food in. You need to nourish yourself. You need to give yourself good food. Um, so it's absolutely crucial. And as I say, I kind of mentioned that guy that I got from 8 million to 24 million. Um, I can't remember what his diet was like. I remember for him, heat was quite a big factor because of his work. But there was another guy I worked with who, when we went through his diet, he was picking up chocolate bars on the way back from work. He was getting through, bags of biscuits every day. He enjoyed a fizzy drink or whatever. So when we cleared that stuff up, his sperm quality improved massively. So it does make a huge difference. And it's something that I think a guy should be doing as a preconception thing. So actually, you're thinking of having a family, make sure your diet is clean before you start, you know. And so what kind of foods help and what kind of foods do you need to be thinking about? Well, actually, it is really quite simple and it's kind of common sense. Um, it's all your colourful foods. So it's vegetables, it's fruits, it's good oily fishes, so things like salmon, sardines, mackerel, things that they're high in omega 3s, which are anti-inflammatory. It's lean
Mhm.
cuts of meat, not saturated fats. So steering clear of things like too many steaks or sausages and bacon, processed meats. So again, definitely steering clear of processed meats, avoiding barbecue food, things like that. Um, but yeah, all the stuff that looks beautiful and nice and colourful is all the good stuff that you should be eating. And steer clear of the brown stuff is what I think. And kind of ultra processed food is a big thing. So again, like things like processed ham, processed sausages, bacon, all this stuff that's got additives and salts and sugars and really bad fats are the things to avoid. Um, Nuts are very good for your sperm. So almonds, Brazil nuts, walnuts. Again, they have lots of oils and really good things in there. Um, Tomato puree is actually a really good thing to have. It's very high in lycopene, which is an antioxidant. So one of the things I got my men to do was just have a couple of crackers as a snack with tomato puree on. Again, makes a big difference. And then in terms of supplements, what I must say is that I'm not a nutritionist, but very experienced in kind of coaching people around this stuff. Supplements are that they are there to supplement a deficiency, and there will be some nutritionists that will argue, well, actually, we're not getting as much stuff from our food these days because of the soil, because of mass kind of farming, so we do need to supplement. Um, but don't eat a pizza and then take a supplement. Say, well, it's okay, I'm taking my supplement. Is eat the right foods with the right nutrients in it first, and then get tested. And if you've got a deficiency, take a supplement. And that's exactly the same in terms of kind of vitamins. Well, actually, no. If we're talking supplements and we're talking, say, antioxidants, there's this belief that, okay, if I take antioxidants, that's going to improve my sperm quality. Now, that's not actually true, because if you take too many antioxidants, you can put your body into what's called reductive stress, which is the opposite of oxidative stress, which I talked about. So actually, more isn't always better. And sometimes you can be taking too many supplements, too many antioxidants, and actually it turns off some of the sperm's functions. So actually, what you should be doing is eating healthily. And then if you're still struggling, if your sperm hasn't improved, is get tested, go and see a urologist or andrologist. But those tests need to look at oxidative stress, and maybe you might want to look at some vitamin and mineral kind of tests as well. And then you decide whether you're going to supplement with antioxidants or not. If you've got high oxidative stress, then yes, you need antioxidants, but don't take them blindly and don't over prescribe yourself or overdose on them, because it can be negative. To get the right test and the right advice.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Emma. I hope that helped. But I think it's when it comes to nutrition, you can both female and male, they can encourage themselves, because of course any good food is good for the male, but also for female. So this can be this can be supported by both, of course, and you can do it. I think it's the easiest way, I guess, as well.
Yeah.
So thank you so much indeed. And let's have a look. More questions are coming in. Emma has another question here. And something that, again, we've had many times before. From your perspective, what is the best way to start talking about fertility with men? Any advice? My husband finds it really difficult.
Oh,
Thank you.
bless. Emma, I totally understand. And it's really hard for a woman to kind of get the guy to engage. It's very, very difficult at times. Yeah, men are really weird creatures, and I put myself in that bracket, obviously, anyway, as I'm a man. But I've had many a falling out with my other half about the fact that I've heard something elsewhere that she's told me 7 or 8 times, and then I say, "Oh, did you know?" And she's like, "Yeah, I told you that." So yeah, men are a bit weird, and I don't think I've got a straight, simple answer for you on this one, but kind of a few kind of tips maybe is, I think one is perhaps just being really honest with him and saying, "Look, I know this is a difficult conversation to have, and maybe you don't feel like talking about it, but actually, it would really help me understand how you're feeling and what you're going through, and that actually I will feel better for you sharing stuff, and it won't put more on me. I won't, I will probably feel less stressed by you talking to me and sharing what's going on for you than you holding it all in and not telling me. Because as I said, men tend to hold it in, and they want to stay strong for their partner. To give him permission to actually share what's on his mind, and let him know that actually you're okay with that, and actually that it would help you. Also, kind of a top tip, I don't know where I picked this up from, but go for a walk or do something where you're not sitting face to face, or you're not like, okay, we're going to talk about fertility. Go for a walk. You're not facing each other, so it's not confrontational in that sense. And then maybe open up the conversation. So you're outside of the house. It's a different environment. You know, it's not a confrontational, right? What's going on for you? It's like, how are you feeling? What's going on? Whatever it is. So that's a couple of tactics. The other one might be, Emma, or for anyone, is point him to the infertility support group, point him to the Testim podcasts. Again, this is difficult usually, kind of getting men to kind of see this stuff, or you listen to it in front of him, or you're reading something in front of him, and actually then kind of begin to bring him in. So, oh, look, this article's interesting, or or you've got the Testing podcast on, and you have it on, without headphones, and he can hear bits of it. So you kind of start drip feeding little bits through to him, but it's very hard. Another option might actually be, and this will probably be quite difficult, is counselling. But I know a lot of men that have come through our support group that found infertility counselling really, really helpful. And once they spoke up, once they found somebody who was willing to listen and not judge them or anything like that, it was like a weight was lifted off their shoulder. So, like I said, Emma, I can't give you a definitive, this will do it. Every man is different, every relationship is different, but I hope there's a few.
But good tips for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hopefully, best of luck, Emma. I hope that helps as well. And I think that you gave the good ideas that you can try, to sort of either just kind of show or something slightly and then go from there. And best
Mm.
of luck for sure. Okay. Let's have a look. We have another question from Eva. I am in the UK. I understand that most GPs follow templates via a system called Ardins to make sure they have a structure of treatment based on BMA, sorry, not sure here, guidelines, etc. Have you heard of these and are there ones for fertility?
Mm. That's quite a technical question, isn't it? I haven't heard of Ardens, but I know obviously the NICE guidelines which I referred to, and I have looked at the NICE guidelines, and there are specific NICE guidelines for fertility, Eva. So you can look them up. Look up NICE guidelines for fertility, and I actually went through them, and there's something like 16 pages, and I think I worked out roughly about one page relates to male fertility out of 16 pages. So when you actually look at what the guidance is for male fertility, you'll see a little bit of advice on beer, smoking, general diet stuff. Um, but you won't see much about DNA fragmentation. Well, you won't see anything about DNA fragmentation, oxidative stress. Um, there's very, very little for the man within the NICE guidelines. So, yeah, look them up. They're very easy to find. Have a read of them, and you'll probably be quite shocked to see how little there is for men. And that, unfortunately, as I said in the presentation, that unfortunately is what GPs have to follow. Those guidelines are drawn up from research and evidence and kind of put in place from a committee. But unfortunately, a lot of the research that is in those guidelines around male fertility is over 10 years old and hasn't been updated. There's a lot of research out there for male fertility, but it's not getting through to the right people.
Okay. Thank you indeed for yet another question. Hope that helped, Eva. Thank you. So there might be our final question from Emma once again. So if there's some more questions you wish to ask, you know what to do. Go ahead, type those in. If not, we will be finishing. However, let's have a look at this question. Sorry. So does acupuncture help to improve the quality
Mhm.
of sperm? And what is your opinion on that?
Well, I suppose an ex-acupuncturist, because I've stopped practicing now to focus on testim,
Mm-hmm.
I would of course say yes. But actually, I kind of caveat that. So, acupuncture for fertility amongst women is hugely popular. We saw a huge boost in the UK, mainly when I think kind of Zeta West kind of made it a thing. Um, and there's research to support it, and there was a research study back, I think it was 2007, 2008, that showed uh, women that had acupuncture during IVF had an increased chance of success. So it's definitely had a lot of positive kind of light, and there is evidence to show that acupuncture improves blood flow to the ovaries. So it actually, and there's electroacupuncture decreases the resistance in the uterine artery, so it's good for regulating hormones. It's good for blood supply to, let's say, to thicken the endometrial lining, manages stress and what have you. So there's a lot again on the women's side. There's not a lot of evidence probably on the man's side. Um, my personal opinion when I was an acupuncturist was, yes, I think it will help with those things in terms of kind of blood flow, hormones, stress levels. Um, I never had a kind of formula of acupuncture points that I used specifically for sperm health. And my treatment for men was definitely different to what I treated, the way I treated women in terms of the needles and the points that I used. Um, I think personally the huge benefit for men of acupuncture for fertility is having somebody to talk to, having an hour to themselves, de-stressing, because actually we know stress impacts fertility as well, and all the potential coaching and lifestyle diet that comes alongside it. So actually, if you package that up as a whole kind of you know package, um, you've actually got a really good system of care. You've got a treatment that is an intervention that reduces stress. You've got potentially a kind of almost an element of counselling by having somebody to talk to, possibly somebody who's well trained and knows what they're talking about and can guide you on next tests and what have you. You've got emotional support, Um, so I think if you take all of that, then actually that's going to potentially improve sperm quality. So
Perfect. So
yeah, so
definitely sounds
perhaps a
good.
bit of an oblique answer, but yes.
That's totally understandable. I think it makes sense as well. And we've done some webinars on acupuncture as well. And I remember that acupuncturists mentioned this as well, that sometimes it's not only, as you know, we are focusing only mostly on women, but it's also possible. So hope that helps again. And someone is typing, so let's give it a minute and let's see if we have another question. If not, we will be finishing for today.
Mm.
But I already would like to say thanks everyone for your questions, for being with us today. And it's been great to discuss this, as you know. And there's one more. Yeah, there's a comment here, but let's see. You
Oh,
have been such a breath of fresh air, Ian. I have been following you Testim and link my clients to your site. So best of luck going forward.
oh,
Thank you so much, Donny. That's
thank you,
lovely to
Tony.
hear. Brilliant. Thank you so much. And so we will be finished with that. So glad that we were able to have you, Ian, here today with us. So thank you. You are doing an amazing job, and we are kind of, here webinars, we are here to educate, and of course you are doing very same thing. So I'm glad we were able to have you here and together educate, raise awareness. This is what we all want to do. So thank you so much for joining. And before we finish, anything else you wish to add?
Well, no, just thank you so much. Thank you for that lovely comment, Tony. Thanks for the questions, and yeah, let's crack on and change the world of male fertility and get men the right
Brilliant.
support and help.
Yeah, we are definitely looking forward for some more events coming up, and hopefully we'll of course have more those events focus on male fertility. I'm sure of it, of course, as well. So stay tuned, and thank you so much again, Ian. It was great to have you. And as you know, it has been recorded. So if anyone would like to have a rewatch or would like to share it perhaps with husband or a boyfriend or anyone that might be interested, go ahead and do it. It will be available tomorrow on our website. And this is also, I also would like to invite everyone to join us on Thursday, as we will be back at 7 p.m. and we will talk about fertility coaching tricks from an insider. Professor Alan Thornhill will be with us on Thursday. So I hope you will be able to join us. And thank you everyone for being with us today. Ian, it was lovely to have you. Looking forward for some more events possibly in the
Mm,
future.
definitely.
Thank you so much indeed. And have a good evening, everyone. Thank you. Take
Thank
care.
you. Bye bye.
Bye.